Hi everyone, my name is Jamie Brandis and I'm the program manager for the Colorado SBDC Network's TechSource Commercialization Program. I'd like to welcome you all today to part one of the How to Write a Competitive SBIR STTR Proposal three-part series. We're glad you could join us and we hope that you'll receive some great takeaways today. Very quickly, I'd like to introduce you to our Colorado SBDC TechSource Commercialization Program, which is designed to support science and technology ventures throughout the state of Colorado. Different from many accelerators and incubators that lead to equity funding, SBDC TechSource focuses especially on sources of non-dilutive capital, where there is no equity given, and on technology commercialization and SBIR grants. Colorado SBDC TechSource Commercialization is a specially designed program that taps subject matter experts, such as Stephanie Amond today, to provide you, the science and technology entrepreneurs and companies, from pre-startup through advanced second stage with direct assistance. This comes in the form of customized expert consulting at no cost to you and through relevant workshops and events in person when possible and online throughout the year. This year, all events and meetings are virtual. Topics that we cover include SBIR, STTR, and Advanced Industries grants, R&D tax credits, technology commercialization, IP protection and assistance with the patent process, market research, market sizing, strategic and tactical planning, access to capital, and much more. These resources are available thanks to support from SBA's FAST program, Visa, Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade, the Minority Business Office, Zero, and the City of Boulder. If you're a business located in a rural part of Colorado or are minority or women owned, we may have additional resources to help you, so please reach out. Additionally, I wanted to share a quick note that we do offer a Tech Venture Accelerator program. Our next cohort sessions begin in August and are designed to support Boulder-based businesses at this time, thanks to support from the City of Boulder. You can check out our website for more details, and applications for that program are due this Friday. A few quick things. After this webinar, if you're interested in meeting one-on-one with one of our specialists, or attending events, workshops, or webinars, please visit our website, which is sbdc-techsource.org, to get started. Today's webinar is going to be recorded, and you're going to receive an email following the presentation with a link to the recording, and you will get a copy of today's presentation slides. A few housekeeping things. Everyone is currently on mute. If you do have questions, please type them into the chat bar. We'll try to get to them at the end of today's session. We'll probably only have a few minutes for questions. So if we don't get to yours, we'll keep track of it and hopefully follow up with you afterwards. If you haven't already, I really encourage you to sign up for parts 2 and 3 of this series. They're both separate applications or registrations. So now I'd like to introduce you to today's webinar presenter, Stephanie Amond. Stephanie is the founder of Arrowhead Solutions. This is a full-service solutions provider for government contracting and SBIR STTR grants. She founded Arrowhead Solutions in 2009 after holding contract management positions in both government and private industry for nearly 9 years. Arrowhead was formed with the goal of providing companies with the extra knowledge and manpower they need to succeed in the world of government contracting and innovation grants. Specializing in capture management, proposal preparation, contract management, subcontracts, accounting, and compliance, Arrowhead provides skill sets not commonly available to smaller government contractors and smaller technology ventures. Arrowhead Solutions, SBDC TechSource, and other organizations partner on coloradosbir.com to increase timely information and education for Colorado's SBIR and government contracting companies. We've been fortunate to work with Stephanie for many years. So now I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate it. Welcome everybody to today's presentation. As Jamie mentioned, this will be a 3-part series. Today's presentation really deals with what SBIR is, how do you think about this program within the greater context of your company and growth of your company, and kind of the initial planning steps. Part 2 will really deal with the proposal preparation, kind of getting into the weeds of what to expect. And part 3 will start talking about what the submission process looks like, best practices to ensure that your proposal has the best likelihood of success, and some miscellaneous topics to be aware of. So you may or may not be familiar with the SBIR STTR program. If you are, hopefully you'll learn something a little bit new here. If you're not, I aim to just educate you soup to nuts in this whole entire thing to give you a better idea, because I've had so many clients that have had such great success, and the SBDC has done such a great job in growing companies through this program. I'm really excited to be able to share some more information about it with you today. To get started, we'll just kind of talk about the details of phase 1, or part 1, excuse me, of this presentation. So we'll talk about what the SBIR STTR program is, what it is, what it's not, you know, what to really kind of think about how it exists in the larger context of federal contracting and getting money from the federal government. We'll talk a lot about the phases. If you've ever heard about SBIR, we talk about phases all the time. We'll primarily be focusing in this entire series about phase 1, with the assumption that that's where you're going to be entering, but we never go into phase 1 without planning to phase 3. So we'll talk about that. There's a lot of questions about eligibility. There's a lot of unique companies out there. There are rules about who can participate and who cannot. Critically, the agencies and topics are really where we're going to spend some time on. You know, every agency is a little bit different, and we kind of want to talk about, you know, what is the government looking for in terms of innovation, and then we'll just start talking about proposal preparation in general. Just if you're thinking that this is something you want to go for, we'll just kind of really nick the edge of proposal prep, and we'll save the rest of proposal prep for part 2 next week. Okay, so the overview of this program, the SBIR STTR program, and mostly you'll hear me say SBIR and I'll end up leaving STTR off. It's a minor element of the overall program, but it stands for Small Business Innovative Research, and STTR is the Small Business Technology Transfer. And the whole purpose is to fund early stage R&D, and specifically for small businesses. And I use the word tech in parentheses, or excuse me, quotes, because tech doesn't necessarily need to be high tech. We're not absolutely talking about software. We're not absolutely talking about things that fly in space. Granted, that's a lot of where the money goes. But we really want to talk about R&D at innovative companies, and often that falls into technology. So it could be high tech, it could be low tech, as long as it's innovative, and we're looking at growth through R&D. That's what we want to do. A lot of people don't know this, but this program, which has been around for a long time, it is the largest source of early stage financing for small businesses. So as Jamie mentioned, we'd like to talk about non-dilutive capital. You know, this is the government investing in your company in the form of financing that does not need to be repaid. And there's no equity taken out of your company. You know, this is not an investor, but it is an investment. So this is a super cool program. A lot of people think it's too good to be true. There's a lot of hoops to jump through, and you know, it's not without its red tape being in government funding, of course, but it's super fantastic for so many companies. It is a 3-phase program, as you saw in that last slide. We'll go through what each phase will be. The Small Business Administration actually is the coordinating agency for the SBIR program. So it is the kind of umbrella, so to speak, for all the agencies to work under. And it is the agency that dictates the policy directives that come out governing the program. It also reviews its progress, how the agencies are doing. I have some information later on. They provide an annual report regarding, use of funds, and Congress is always updated on it, and the program is always appropriated by Congress. The SBA is also the main information link to the SBIR program. So again, sort of as the umbrella agency, but the SBA itself is not the one reviewing proposals or issuing solicitations. They're just the ones that manage the program. So as you see, you'll see SBA registration requirements, or you'll see SBA information, kind of filtering through all the agencies, but just note that SBA is just the manager here. Okay, so what are the ultimate goals of this program? It's going to provide you early stage financing. It has some government red tape. It's going to help you with maybe funding some R&D. But like ultimately, why did the government put this in place? What was their purpose for saying we're going to be an investor, or we're going to make an investment, but we're not going to be a true investor? The reason is that they really, back in the early 80s, they really saw that small businesses are the key to stimulating technological innovation, that a lot of great stuff comes out of small business versus like the Lotkeys of the world. There are a lot of federal research and development needs. There are a lot of missions and programs within civilian and military agencies that really want to be on the cutting edge of R&D, and they're not doing that within the agency. And again, like large, big prime contractors, like the Boeings and the GMs aren't doing those things necessarily either. So small business is where it's at. Another key goal is the encouragement of participation by socially and economically disadvantaged persons. So having a program that really allows small businesses who may have been started by socially and economically disadvantaged persons kind of gives the SBA a way to reach those people through the SBIR STTR program. The private sector commercialization of technology and innovation is really probably the crux of the entire program, and you'll hear me talk about commercialization quite a bit throughout all of the phases. The government's intention is saying, hey, you know what, we know there's cool ideas in small business. We know that people are thinking of really neat solutions. We can apply those solutions not only within federal agencies and missions, but we also think that these things can be commercialized into the market, therefore supporting the greater United States economy. So per the SBA, I just have this written as the mission, but the mission of this whole entire program is to support the scientific excellence and technological innovation through investment. So again, American priorities, building a strong national economy with small businesses as the key to doing that. So that is the ultimate altruistic goals of the SBIR STTR program. And that's why they're willing to give you money in the form of non-dilutive capital to build your business. The STTR, again, there's kind of this hyphen in between SBIR, STTR. It has the same goals, really: technological innovation, encouraging participation with social and economically disadvantaged persons, increasing commercialization. The key difference, which I have in green here, is that there is a technology transfer cooperative between small businesses and research institutions. So within the STTR, and we'll get this a little bit later in the presentation, there is a partnership with a research institution. And so the theory is that the research institutions also have great technology, of course, coming out of there, and that having a small business partner allows this technology transfer to happen, and then the ability to commercialize becomes easier. So there are slight differences within STTR and SBIR, and the research institution participation is really the key there. As I mentioned, the history, this goes all the way back to 1982. Again, the purpose is to strengthen the role of small business in federally funded R&D, and the hopes that innovation will come of that. Since then, it has been renewed by Congress multiple times. It has resulted in tens of thousands of issued patents. I think the last numbers I saw were from a few years ago, and it was 70,000 patents. And over 700 public companies have come out of this. There are some very large companies. I believe Viasat is one of those companies that came and started as an SBIR company. And that there's $50 billion in venture capital investments that have come from companies that have participated in this program. So a lot of people like to see the SBIR program as a launching pad. You know, this is money to kind of get you going. Eventually, you won't be eligible to participate anymore, and that is the hope. And that you go off and get your patents, you get your IPO, you get your venture capital, and you go from there. There are plenty of companies that have been around for decades participating in the SBIR company as more of an R&D company as their core, and that's totally fine as long as you meet all the benchmarks that are required by the program. So, you know, there's lots of different kind of companies that participate. So a lot of people ask me what winning companies look like, and they can be, I have seen anything from a 2-person company that was out of someone's garage to a 400+ person company that, you know, is still within the small business size standards, but doing quite a bit of commercialization and doing quite a bit of sales and marketing to both the government as well as private industry. So these companies come in all shapes and sizes. The program, as I mentioned, is a launching pad for a lot of them, or it's bread and butter for quite a few of them too. I have clients in both camps, and it just depends on the strategy of the company. And so this is a really good place to kind of talk about some of these success stories. I have a link. When you get a copy of these slides, this link will be live and you can go wander through. But I picked 4 of success stories that were posted in July, just to give you an idea of what kind of companies are winning these contracts. And so, you know, there's a software for psychology about diagnosing traumatic brain injury. This Octaflex Environmental, it's a small business in South Dakota and does decontamination work. This Simbex, again, a New Hampshire company, small business that's doing really cool prosthetics. And the story, if you read this one, is kind of interesting, and how the idea came about for the founder of Simbex and how he decided he was going to get into prosthetics and what really kind of motivated him. And then SpeechGear I thought was really interesting too, because we have a technology of translation, and it can support civilians, warfighters, and hearing impaired. And so this is where we really this is a good example of commercialization, where perhaps the DoD would fund something regarding a translation technology, but ultimately this can be sold to civilian travelers or the hearing impaired, and perhaps the hearing impaired, it could be sold through HHS, another agency. So, you know, we want to really expand our mind about what technology is. Technology can be decontamination, prosthetics, software, translation technology, you know, it can really be anything. And you can really be creative on how you apply technology and who will pay for it. As I mentioned, for STTR, this is a cooperative R&D partnership, and a research institution can be a university, a federal R&D center, or nonprofit research institute. So you can partner with one of these research institutions, or RI, to win an STTR. And again, the whole point is to move ideas from the institution into the market where they can benefit public and private sector. So the key here is that there is a partnering and there is a detail of allocation of intellectual property rights. We won't get into the weeds there. I just wanted to point out that that's the difference when you're partnering with a research institution. The small business must perform at least 40% of the R&D, and then at least one of the research institutions needs to perform at least 30% of the R&D. So when we talk about the R&D, we're talking about the scope. We're not necessarily talking about money. And this also allows the principal investigator to be employed at the research institution. We'll get into that when we get into part 2, but and we'll talk more about principal investigators. But the STTR is definitely more of a collaboration. Oftentimes we see this with universities. That's typically a particular professor and maybe his lab, and you've got a relationship with them and you want to go after an STTR. You won't see as many STTRs happening because of funding limitations. I like to talk to people a lot about what SBIR is not, because people hear, oh, I can fund this invention, and that's how they start to think about this as an invention. It's not necessarily, it's not a place to sell your invention to the government. This is early stage financing. It's R&D. It's not, I already have this prototype or this patent and now I just want to go sell it to the government. There are other ways to sell your invention to the government, but it's not through the SBIR STTR program. This is a program to develop something that we would call an invention. It's not necessarily a method just to have your patent paid for. I have heard a lot of people just say, well, I just need to get a patent and I'm just going to use this money to pay for the patent. And that's not it either. You will and can get a patent through this, and you will get a contract or a grant to do work. How you pay for the patent is another webinar on accounting, but it's not necessarily a method to say the government's going to write me a check so I can get my patent. It's not guaranteed, as you'll see here in a few slides. It's definitely competitive. As you get into phase 2 and phase 3, the competition rules become more lax or non-existent. But again, this is really focusing on phase 1. It's definitely competitive. Although there are companies that are decades in the making of SBIR money and that it is a bread and butter, it's not supposed to be a continuous R&D track. You will be measured on your commercialization results, how much sales and revenue and additional investment that you get post phase 2, and how successful you are in taking your ideas into market. So you just can't just do R&D over and over and over again. You'll get kicked out of the program. It does, as I mentioned, it is red tape. It's federal government. There's not much we can do about that. So there is reporting, there are audits, there are government regulations. That's why Arrowhead exists, is to make sure everybody stays in good graces with the federal government. But just because it's small business and because it's R&D doesn't mean, it's just for fun. You do have to take into consideration a lot of things. And it's also not for unsolicited proposals. So as you'll see, we'll talk about what topics and agency needs look like. It's not for you to go out and just say, hey, I got this great idea and I'm just going to send this proposal to the EPA. It doesn't work like that. So we do have to follow the process, which is what we'll get into. Let's talk about the phases. So I've already talked about phases a few times here. It's a 3-phase program. So phase 1, the whole purpose is to test the scientific merit and feasibility of your idea. So the government has a need, you have an idea to meet that need. The whole purpose is in 6 to 12 months. It depends on the agency how long it will be, for you to essentially test this idea, and see if you can get to a good foundation for moving on. They're usually valued between $50,000 and $250,000, again, agency dependent. So say you did a great job in phase 1. There's typically multiple phase 1 awards for the same topic. and you did a great job, and the government loves you, you may get a phase 2 to further develop that concept. And typically this goes to like prototype or demonstration stage. And this is typically a 2-year-long project and is valued between $750,000 and $1 million. Again, these amounts vary, but the goal is obviously to move from phase 1, get a proposal in for phase 2, be selected for phase 2, and then at the end of phase 2 is this nebulous thing called phase 3. It's not really for some agencies, and it's an official contract, you're going to get a phase 3 contract. But typically when we say we've moved into phase 3, the purpose at that point is commercialization. So you're getting non-SBIR, STTR funds to really take that prototype or demonstration to the next level. So you're going to take it to market, and that's the hope. And so it's follow-on funds. They're non-SBIR dollars. So if you've ever heard the term color of money, that's what it is. It's just non-SBIR. The goal is always to bring phase 1 into phase 3. So when you're sitting there thinking about a phase 1 idea or some technology that you have growing as a little nugget in your company, before you go into this program, the first thing you need to think about is what's the end game? What would phase 3 look like? Who's the market once this goes beyond prototype phase? And then not only do you have to talk about that in phase 1 proposal, there's no point in getting into phase 1 if you're not going to end up going to phase 3. I wanted to bring up phase 0 a little bit. In years past, NIH had a pilot program for an official phase 0, and there is a program that exists at some agencies, like pre-phase 1. And the whole purpose is to pitch your idea or concept before being invited to propose. And I really like this because a phase 1 proposal is not something you do on the back of a napkin in 30 minutes. I mean, this is an investment in bid and proposal dollars and time. So it's really nice to be able to pitch something fairly low risk and low impact to your finances, and let them tell you whether or not they think they like it. So that's kind of nice. But the purpose of the pilot program, purpose of the agencies that do use phase 0 is to, again, kind of mold that idea in phase 1 to ensure that phase 3 is really going to be valuable. I have this link in here for the NSF, and if you are interested in NSF, I would definitely encourage you to go take a look at this link. NSF supports big, bold ideas that have social and economic impact and have very, very broad industry and bases and technological bases, and everything from AI to materials to software and biological and just all of these things. So it's a great place. It is tough to win, but they do the phase 0. So you can spend 30 minutes putting in a phase 0 pitch online, and then you'll get a response from a real human that will give you, hey, this is great, or no, this isn't great, and this is what I would suggest you try again. And so if you have any interest in NSF, definitely use this link to check it out and see if you can pitch. A lot of people ask me how easy it is to win. So I wanted to show you some statistics. This chart, 2019 looks like it fell off a cliff. Where I all feel like we all think 2020 fell off a cliff. I thought that was 2020. But the reporting hasn't necessarily all come in yet. So that's why it kind of looks the way it does. But as you can see, kind of over time since this started, this program's grown. There was a little bit of dip since 2013 in the award count in terms of the number of awards. But what's happened instead is the value and the obligation of dollars has gone up. So the government's maybe awarding fewer, but they're putting more money onto those contracts. In general, the firm count, which is the lowest line there, the bottom line there, has just kind of gone to a plateau. So the firm count's about the same. A lot of people ask me, you know, where do you spend the most time? And I say DoD, and that's because they have the most money. So the DoD spent, along with HHS, spends the most, but they award the most contracts. HHS comes in second with the number of awards, but they have high dollars placed onto these awards. And then you can see all the other participating agencies kind of trail off after that. So most of my clients play in the DoD, HHS, DOE, and NASA space. More people are getting into NSF and USDA. But as you can see, the rest of the agencies, because their overall R&D budgets are small, you know, they have a small award capacity. This information is from 2017. It's the last annual report that's been publicized. But these are the proposal selection rates for phase 1 on the left and phase 2 is on the right. So it's interesting how they all kind of shake out. But you know, DHS and EPA have low dollars but high selection for phase 1. And NASA has, you know, 23% proposal selection rate for phase 1, but that, you know, they're at the bottom on phase 2 for 40%. Part of this is because of the structure on how each agency moves from phase 1 to phase 2. Part of it is how many awards are made in phase 1 and how many awards they intend to make for phase 2. But ultimately, you can kind of see what the averages end up being. Again, so for the win ratios, I'll just kind of go through this quickly, but for civilian agencies, phase 1 selection rate was 16%, phase 2 is 52%. These are for civilians. For DoD agencies, selection is a 19%, so a little bit higher, and phase 2 is a 69% selection rate. So, you know, on average, when people just call me and say, hey, what's my chances? I typically say it's 20%, and this is if you get everything correct in your proposal. So the key to winning really is about innovation and meeting the agency's needs. Eligibility. As I mentioned earlier, there are rules to participate in this program. So you have to be a small business with less than 500 people. And this includes affiliates. And if you don't know what an affiliate is, or if you're feeling you might be affiliated, meaning there's parent or sister companies or common ownership among companies somehow, you should take a look at the SBA's rules on affiliation. Pretty much, you know, you can't have common control. And if you do have common control, you need to count all those employees of the commonly controlled businesses. It must be independently owned and operated. For profit, this is for SBIR. You must have the principal place of business in the United States. And this is slightly complicated, but essentially needs to be majority owned by US citizen or resident alien or other small business concerns that are owned by residents or aliens. So the easiest way to think about it is majority owned by a US person or US small businesses. There is an ownership exception that's becoming a lot more popular to talk about right now, where venture capital or hedge funds or private equity actually are majority owners in some capacity or ratio or combination. Only NIH explicitly allows that sort of ownership structure. So if you do have potential majority ownership by VC or equity firm or hedge fund, or foreign individual ownership by foreign persons or foreign companies, that's where you need to seek professional guidance. That's something that we help a lot of companies with, is to navigate ownership and potential restructuring of stock and shares in order to make them eligible for an SBIR. So just because on its surface it doesn't seem that you could be eligible due to nationality or investors, that doesn't immediately kick you out. There could be some easy things you could do to still participate. As a business, say you're eligible to propose, you do need to understand what needs to be in place in order for you to continue to work on the program. So the work must be performed in the United States. You cannot have an employee sitting in Germany doing the work. You cannot have a subcontractor who's like a 1099 sitting in Japan. All of the work must be performed on US soil. For phase one, minimum of 2/3 of the work has to be done by the small business. And for phase two, that drops down to 50%. That calculation is agency dependent. NASA has a very helpful calculation example in their solicitation that will tell you if you've met these thresholds, if you are subcontracting to anybody. But the self-performance is important because they don't want any of these small businesses to be pass-throughs. The principal investigator, who is the person leading the research and development, must be employed at the small business for the majority of their time. So full-time or majority of the time is calculated typically by saying that you can't work more than 19 hours a week somewhere else. But pay attention to the solicitation for the clear definitions of all that. To have an STTR partner be eligible to go with you is that they have to also be located in the United States, and they can either be nonprofit, college or university, nonprofit research organization, or an FFRDC. Okay, so where do we begin? I think I'm eligible. I think I've got technology. I have an idea. How do I finance it? Non-dilutive capital sounds great. Okay, so SBIR sounds great. It's a best fit if you have a particular technology that you really is kind of core to your business, or you're wanting to develop something new as a product line within your business, or you have an idea and you're looking for something to advance it. So there's a fine line between having a technology too far along in what we call the technology readiness level. We don't want your idea to be too far along, but it also just can't be an idea that you had, while eating your cereal in the morning. Like, it has to have a little bit of legs to it, but it can't have too much legs to say you're past phase one. We kind of need to be in the sweet spot. So if you're in that sweet spot and you're eligible to apply, the first two key steps are to find funding. And if it is through the SBIR program, you have to look at the agencies that might hold interest in your topic area. And then we have to apply to a specific solicitation. And the timing needs to be right, which is what we'll get to here. Here are the agencies that participate. These are participants based upon the fact that their R&D budgets are of a certain size. They are required to allocate these. If anybody has over $100 million in R&D budget, they have to allocate 3.2% of that to SBIR and 0.45% to STTR. So that's why STTR is so minor. It's just not as funded. So here's everybody who participates. It's not just bombs and bullets. Department of Agriculture, Department of Transportation, all of these agencies are looking for unique R&D ideas. To note about the agencies, as I mentioned earlier, SBA is the umbrella, but each agency on this prior list administers its own program, and they have to do so within the guidelines of Congress and under the umbrella of SBA. So they are all different. They designate the R&D topics that they're interested in their solicitations, and they each do that differently. They could be a broad topic like NSF, or they could be very specific like the Navy. They are made on a competitive basis. So the proposals are evaluated against the solicitation, and the best value, or the highest evaluated company will win. The solicitations are posted online, and within the solicitation, they give you the instructions to write a proposal, but most importantly, or equally importantly, for this planning phase of SBIR for yourselves is to really look at the technical areas of interest, or what we call topics. So, you know, what are they asking for? What are they looking for? What do they think's cool? What do they need? You know, that's really what the topic is. Each agency has its own submission guidelines, and that's within the solicitation. It will tell you. Some agencies follow an annual solicitation cycle. Others float solicitations as they need. I'll show you a slide here about that. They post them on their sites. You can also get to them through SBIR.gov, or if it's an agency that uses grants, through grants.gov. And you can go to the SBIR.gov solicitation site to find estimated due dates. And there's some great information in there. There's a couple that are open right now and some that are coming up. But I just give you examples of these links so that you can go out and take a look at, you know, just various methods that the agencies post. But this SBIR.gov is essentially your one-stop portal that will fish you out to different agencies that have their solicitations and their own SBIR sites to work from. I wanted to give a couple examples of solicitations, and hopefully I don't have an issue with my presentation here, but I wanted to show you the difference. So I'm going to show you NASA, and I'll show you an NSF really quickly. So for NASA, this was 2020 solicitation. It was posted earlier this year. So this is the NASA site, the solicitation's here, it's hyperlinked. You can also download it in PDF. So this is what this one looks like, which is, you know, pretty typical. It comes in chapters. NSF, on the other hand, is more like a grant, and it comes through in this very long document that is the solicitation, and will cross-reference other documents, so it can become a little bit more burdensome. But and so again, perfect example of the fact that these are both SBIR programs, but they are managed very differently by these agencies. So pay attention to the solicitations. You cannot necessarily, you can potentially reuse an idea between NASA and NSF, but you cannot reuse the exact proposal. There might be bits and pieces you can copy and paste, but you won't be able to use them, you know, word for word. A lot of people ask me, how do they know they've got an idea, they're eligible, they see a topic, but how do they know that they have a good chance of winning? I like to tell them to look at past awards or past topics and solicitations to see what the agency has funded in the past and who has won. So is there a trend in what they're looking for? You know, on its surface, it might meet your technology, but are they going down a path that's really not exactly what your technology is? What exactly are they funding? You know, what end solution or what commercialized product are they looking for? And then, you know, kind of who's been winning them? Is there a competitor of yours that you see that is over and over and over winning? Can you unseat them, for lack of a better word? But you can use this link to take a look to see who's won. And then NASA themselves, some of the actual agencies will give you a link to see who's actually won. So you don't necessarily have to go through SBIR.gov and search. You can go straight to, say, like NASA, and see who's won for 2020 and kind of wander through and read some of their abstracts and get yourself familiar. Okay, you've done your due diligence. You're thinking, oh, I think I'm going to do a proposal. So let's start talking about the initial steps. So there are quite a few registrations, and if you're super brand new, you do need to go get an EIN or TIN, you know, tax ID number, to then get your Dun & Bradstreet number, which is, again, another registration. And then those numbers will get you a SAM.gov registration, which is essentially your ticket to being a government contractor. This registration has a lot of information in it. It will it will provide you a ticket to not just do SBIR, but to do any federal contracting at all. So once you have those, you need those all first, then you can go register with the grants.gov site or whatever agency SBIR site that you're going to propose through. You know, DoD has one, NASA has one. You also need to register with the SBA company registry, and this is a hyperlink here. So this is a separate registry under SBIR.gov that's managed by the SBA, and you get a registration number. So you're going to have 4 or 5 codes and numbers that are associated with your company. And it's something that you have to do once, and SAM and SBA you have to update your annually. But really, just these first 5 bullets are kind of just this one-time thing. Then there's all these other different registrations for each agency, and then a lot of them are moving to login.gov to increase cybersecurity and move away from older like 2-factor authentication issues or any password issues they were having. So that's yet another one. So just prepare. This could take 6 to 8 weeks to start. SAM, it just depends. But again, this could take a really long time. So if you're interested in doing SBIR and something's due at the end of August, you may be able to get all of this done before the end of August, but you'll just have to start after you get off this webinar. DOE also requires a letter of intent to propose, and that has to be done 7 weeks before solicitation close date. So if you do find something from DOE, you read really carefully. You may not be able to propose if you hadn't sent in that letter of intent. Here's just a really quick glance of registrations by entity, who requires what. They all require DUNS and SAM and SBA, but then you can see all these other systems that they use. So with planning and strategy, kind of going back to, I'm eligible, I got an idea, I think this is going to work, I'm okay with all the red tape and the registrations. I really need to understand, do I have applicability to the agency? There's lots of agencies, that I could go for. Which one has the best opportunity? Which ones are coming up when? Do I have time? Did I just miss one? Let's plan the proposal pipeline here. Which topic would I go after? Maybe my technology is valuable for more than one topic, and each agency has a rule on how many proposals you can submit, and if you can submit multiple proposals for each topic. And then ultimately, what's the commercialization potential of my idea? And do I have to team or subcontract with anybody? We'll talk more about a lot of this in part 2 of this series, because these are all decisions that you are going to make before you say go, but then you're actually going to have to write about this and pitch to this. So where is your technology most applicable? Is it NASA? Is it NSF? Is it both? Is it equally both? How big is your budget to try for both? Is it a very specific technology, or is it malleable to an agency need? Is it something that for sure is so narrowly defined that you're going to have to just hope and pray that one day a topic comes to you that just fits, or you're going to have to ghost write a topic. The Army actually allows you to do that. Or is it kind of this idea that you're like, oh, if I just tweaked this and this, then it could actually work for this topic, something to think about. Is it high risk and high reward? That's something NSF is looking for. Or is it something that's solely military? Is like really truly the DoD the only place for this? What is the agency currently doing that they think is state of the art? Remember, the agency has a belief system of what they think is state of the art. It may not be what's actually state of the art. Oftentimes it is. They're actually very up to date on the state of the art for R&D and technology. But what are they using to meet their needs now, or what are they planning to do, or where is their gap, and how does your idea fill that gap? Regarding timing, and do I have enough time to do any of these? This is from the SBIR.gov solicitations page, which if you go to this page, below this chart, there's actually a table that has specific dates that were updated on July 9th. But this is just a good snapshot to show you that, for example, DoD releases topics 3 times a year. NASA does it once a year. And it says October, November, December, but because of COVID, that whole entire thing changed, and it'll probably be in the spring this year. NSF is constantly ongoing. HHS is constantly ongoing as well. So this kind of gives you an idea, you know, maybe you might want to look at DOD and DOE right now, or NSF or HHS. Those are the ones that are coming up. Talk about commercialization potential. Ultimately, like I said in the very beginning, we need to think about phase 3 right away. So where does this technology end up? Is it sitting in a Lockheed Martin jet? Is it sitting on the shelf at Home Depot? You know, where does this go? How many people use it? Who's buying it? What is the market? What does it look like? You're going to start in phase 1 at R&D, and you're going to end in phase 3 at market. So like, what is that market? What do you need to get to that market? Who are all the government customers that you can work with? I have a client that has an NSF grant, but they're looking at DoD as a customer, and they're looking at Forest Service. You know, there's a lot of government customers. It doesn't necessarily need to be the one that is funding you, your SBIR. Who are the commercial customers? You know, could there be both small and large business or individuals who could potentially purchase what comes out of this? What is the value of that market? You know, what is its size? How big is it? You will need to quantify it. You know, what sales and revenue will look like, both in dollars and units, if that's applicable. So really think about the market size of where this is going to end up. And ultimately, what is this going to do for your company? You know, is this going to be a new product line? Is this just a little bit of money to kind of get some technology that you were already planning on commercializing, and now you just don't have to use private investment? You can use government investment, and you're just going to do a few SBIRs and be done with it and move on with life. Or is the government going to become a company, or excuse me, a customer of yours? You know, what is the plan for having this revenue stream into your company, and the plan for moving this innovation into market, and what are you going to do there? And finally, we're going to talk about teaming just briefly, and we'll back up on it in part 2. But there are a lot of self-performance requirements. But as you're thinking about, okay, I've got an agency, I've got a topic, I can understand the commercialization path, I know what I want this to do with my company, but inevitably almost everyone has to ultimately bring in somebody or some other company from the outside. And I'm not necessarily talking about I have to go buy materials from McMaster-Carr or Newegg, or I have to get a machine shop to work on something. I'm really thinking about a person or a company that's going to have to help you perform a scope of work. Like maybe they have a lab that you need to use, or maybe there's a consultant who's an expert in what you need to do, something of that effect. So remember, you have to self-perform quite a bit of this. And so you may need to hire people upon winning in order to self-perform. You know, say if you're just 1 or 2 people, you may not be able to spend all of the money. So you might have to subcontract to somebody in order to do what you want to do. So we'll talk more about what a subcontractor or consultant is. But a subcontractor essentially, as I just mentioned, is somebody who's going to be performing a portion of the scope of work that you're pitching. You don't have to partner. You do not have to subcontract or team unless you're doing an STTR with a research institution. You can totally self-perform. I rarely see any phase 2s self-performed though. There's typically somebody in the 2 years, $1 million that you have, that you're going to have to use to help you get from point A to point B. So in phase 1, you have to plan ahead. So you might want to bring in somebody just even for $5,000 in phase 1 to participate if you plan on using them in phase 2. It just can only help things. And when you are thinking about teaming, there are a lot of subcontracting requirements and rules that go along with this. Phase one is really straightforward, pretty simple, pretty easy, not really audited. You know, I don't want to say it's everybody ignores it, but really getting a good foundation with subcontracting and purchasing in phase one will help you plan for phase two, because especially if you're going into DoD, you're gonna hit head on a lot of red tape if you're not getting prepared for it. And finally, if you are thinking about doing a subcontract with somebody or teaming with somebody, just ensure there's a non-disclosure agreement in place. It's funny how small this world is, even though like 11,000 proposals go in a year. In your particular little industry, there might be a lot of familiar names, and so you don't necessarily want your idea to be passed on by your potential subcontractor. So make sure you have an NDA in place before you start chit-chatting it up with whoever you want to work with. Along with all the other websites that are hyperlinked within, here's just kind of your basic websites that you can kind of wander. I always suggest going to SBIR.gov first. And with that, that is the end of part one. So I am ready to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I think this is really great information. So I know we only have a couple minutes, so if anyone has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat bar. I will just mention that the way that we kind of work with businesses is that I'm the first point of contact for anyone who does want consulting services. So there is some paperwork on our website. It's really quick, but it's it's SBDC-TechSource-.org. Sorry, I said that wrong. SBDC-TechSource.org. So please feel free to fill out that paperwork. And then I'll just have initial discussion with you to find out more about your business and direct you to resources from there. So Stephanie is very gracious in offering her time for these webinars, but she can be pretty busy at other times. So definitely always want to be cognizant of her time. But we do have other specialists that can help with some of these areas of concern as well. So after that initial phone call with you, I can definitely connect you to our resources from there. Stephanie, do you want to go over quickly what you're going to cover in the next 2 sessions, just so people know what to expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So in part 2, we'll really kind of get into the meat of what the proposal entails. What parts are needing to be written and built, what strategy you need to have about building those, and kind of just get into that nitty-gritty of proposal preparation, which includes discussion about pricing, and getting an adequate number. And then in part 3, we'll really kind of talk about refining the proposal. So what we talk about is a red team review and ensuring that you're really giving the best pitch that you can. We're going to talk about commercialization, data rights, and intellectual property protection. I'll probably touch on that a little bit in part 2 as well, because there's something you need to think about in proposal phase, and there's stuff you need to think about during post-award. And then we'll talk about some post-award considerations, and just, both sessions will have a lot of time for questions. And I'll try to give quite a bit of examples. As you already saw, the differences between each agency can be broad. So when I'm talking about proposal preparation, I'll try to give some examples. But if anybody's on today's presentation and would like to see something specific about an agency that might not be DoD or NASA, then I'm happy to bring something up for them.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I have a couple minutes, so I'll try to do a quick question here. So one person's asking, what's the difference between a CAGES number and a DUNS number?
So the DUNS number is a number that's assigned by what's essentially a private company that's been contracted by the federal government. It's Dun & Bradstreet is the company, and it's just a number that Dun & Bradstreet gives you after they legitimize the fact that you're a real company. So they want to see like incorporation documents and you have a tax ID number. A CAGE number is a number that's actually assigned to you and I won't get into the weeds on how it's assigned, but it comes through your sam.gov registration. So you have to have a DUNS number in order to get a cage number. And then the cage number is essentially your ID as a federal contractor.
Perfect. Thank you. So I know we have other questions coming in, but it looks like we're right up on time. So we will keep track of these questions and look to get them answered either right after this or see if we can answer them in the next couple of sessions. So thanks again, Stephanie, for taking the time. I also just wanted to mention again quickly that we do have that Tech Venture Accelerator starting for Boulder companies coming up with applications due this Friday. And then we are also looking at doing one in the fall as well, depending on funding things that we might get or not. So our next session is going to be next Tuesday. The following one will be the following Tuesday. So really hope you can join us for those two as well. We'll get more deeper into some of these things that we covered today. So thanks again, Stephanie, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Okay, thanks. Have a good one, everybody.